This is the first video in a series of videos that I'm going to put together, basically showing you how you can use Fusion 360 to design and build your Fastline follower, so that then you can 3D print the chassis and any other parts and assemble it to complete the actual Fastline follower autonomous robot. So we're going to start this first video by designing the chassis around the Arduino. Okay, so I have a number of models that I've downloaded from different websites on the internet, namely GrabCAD and Thingiverse. So you can see my Arduino Uno down here in my data panel. We're going to be using that to get started. And the way I like to do it is I like to build around the components, namely in this case the main component, the Arduino, since this is going to be an Arduino powered line follower robot. But before we can drop that into our work environment, we do need to save the model here. This is going to initialize the automatic save feature. So I'm going to call this Fastline follower demo-1. Okay. And the only reason we do this is so that we can initiate the automatic save. Now I can drag and drop the Arduino over here. Okay. Now, this may be different for you depending on the orientation of your model, but I am going to, let me say OK over here. Okay. Or actually, before I say OK, now at this point, before I copy it in and click on the OK button, I want to notice the orientation of my view cube up here. Notice that Y is up and Z is pointing to the left. Okay. I actually want to build my model with Z pointing up. Okay. Which, interestingly enough, is the orientation of the Arduino, right? The Arduino board is oriented such that the normal to the board is in the Z direction, right? Positive Z direction. So, in fact, to get this oriented properly, I don't want to do anything to my board. My board is fine. The problem is the orientation of my view cube, or how I'm looking at it. Okay, so we're going to do a couple things. First of all, I'm going to click on the front view here, and then I'm going to expand this menu, and I'm going to set my current view. And I know you're not able to see the fly out here, but when you say select your current view, it's going to give you an option of front or top. And I want to set this current view to top. Okay. And you can see what that does to the view cube. All right. So that's how I want it. But notice when I click on the home, it still sends me to this orientation with Y up. So now I have to fix the home. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin this around like so. Click on the corner to get this view, this isometric view. Now Z is up, which is what I want. X and Y are in the plane of what will be the chassis, or plane parallel to the Arduino board. And I'm going to go back to this view cube menu, and I'm going to say set current view as, and I'm going to choose fit to view. And I know you can't see that, but I'm going to choose fit to view. Now, let me show you this. When I pick a view, like whatever, like this, and I click on the home, it reverts back to exactly what I want. Z is up, X and Y are parallel to the Arduino board. All right. So now, moving on from here, what we need to do is we need to start building our chassis. And the way we're going to build our chassis, the chassis for the Fastline follower, and how we're going to mount the Arduino, is we're going to mount the Arduino by using these 4 holes that are designed for screws. So we have 1 hole here, 2, there's 1 back here in the top, and then 1 over here on the right hand side. Okay, so those are going to be the holes that we're going to mount the Arduino to the chassis with. But we're not just going to be able to stick the Arduino board on top of the chassis, right, that we're going to design, because we have these pins, these standoffs that are on the underside of the Arduino board. And if you look at an actual Arduino board, you do see these there, and they're important. So we're not going to be able to put the board, the Arduino, directly on top of the chassis. We're going to have to stand it off a bit. And if I look at this view right here, you can see that the pins that protrude the most are these pins over here on our power connection. All right, they're the power connection over here, and that's the ones that we have to design for. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new component first. So we want to start the chassis build. So I'm going to go up to Assemble and say New Component, right? And this component name is going to be Chassis. All right. And that becomes the active component. You can see it over here in the browser on the left-hand side. That becomes the active component. And now I want to create a offset plane. All right. The offset plane is going to be a plane that's going to be offset from the bottom of the Arduino board. And it's going to offset equal to a distance that's going to allow it to be separated from these metal pins right here. Okay, so I'm going to go up to and in fact we can do this with the Arduino. Let's go up here to that one right there. We don't have to do it with the transparent mode on. All right. So I can go to construct an offset plane, and I'm going to choose the underside of the Arduino, and then let me switch to a side view. And I'll show you by moving it down how much we need to offset it, right? So that's an offset of 4 millimeters. And let me zoom in here so you can see. An offset of 4 millimeters for this offset plane will clear these tabs. If we go 3 millimeters, you can see there's still going to be interference. Of course, we could probably do 3.5 millimeters, but I think 4 millimeters is sufficient. We don't need to have it snug up against there. So I'm going to create this offset plane and say OK, and then go back home. So now I have my offset plane, and you can see it in the construction on the browser. All right. So now let's go back to the chassis. So I'm going to activate this, and we'll go start a new sketch, and I'm going to choose my offset plane that I just created. All right, and there we go. Now, how do I want my board and my chassis to be oriented relative to each other? Do I want my chassis to be oriented so that this direction in the positive X direction is the front of the board, or do I want like the positive Y direction to be the front of the board? That's going to be something that you'll need to consider. What I'm going to do is I'm going to orient the board so that my front of the chassis is going to be in the positive X direction, going this way, okay? And you can see my view cube, that is in the positive X direction. If you want to rotate these so that it's more traditional, X to the right and Y up, remember we're looking down on it from the top, then the front of the board is going to be over here, okay? The front of my chassis, all right? What that means is that this is the connection for the power, the batteries in this case. And so I can put my batteries behind the object, the board right here. Okay. We can by the way, we can always change this. Okay. So nothing that we're doing right now is written in stone. All right. So that being said, let's go up to Create. And we're going to choose rectangle and center rectangle because I have the origin right here. I'm going to open this up like so. Okay. All right. Now, let's go ahead and get a dimension in there. So we'll get a top and we'll make this 90. and we'll get the side, and let's make this 65 is good. Again, you can change these depending on what your design is, and later on if you feel like you need more space around this, but this is just to kind of show you how to use this. Notice that in this rectangle, we're balanced on either side of the board, right? If I put dimensions in here from this side of the board to here, you can see it's 585, and this is a driven dimension, right? And this side is 585 as well, right? And then from the front here, it's 10.73. And then from the back here, it's also 10.73, okay? Now, it would be okay if we left those dimensions on, but we're not going to do that. We'll clean up the environment a little bit. So let's just hit delete on these. I just wanted to show you that everything is centered and balanced. Now, we're not done yet. We still want to sketch some things out, and we still need to add some features to our rectangle so that when we extrude it, we get everything that we want in that extrusion. And namely, what we want to do is we want to get these holes for the screws, okay? So I'm going to go to project, and I'm going to project each hole. Now, be careful just to pick the hole, the circle, and not the surrounding items, right? Now, if you also wanted to pick up the border of the Arduino, I would suggest just picking the edges individually that you want, because you can see if I click on the inside here, I'm going to get all these pinholes. And that is a problem. That's going to be a problem when we extrude, okay? Because we'd have to either pick or deselect all those, all right? So I have what I want picked. I'm going to say okay. And then I'll turn off my Arduino so that you can see what I have, right? So there's what my sketch looks like. I'm going to ignore these lines, but I am going to extrude holes in these locations, okay? So at this point, I can finish my sketch, all right? Now, how thick do I want the chassis to be? I feel like 2 millimeters is going to be sufficient. 3 millimeters, possibly. Anything more than 3 is going to be way too thick for a chassis. Less than 2 millimeters, it gets a little bit maybe too flexible. So 2 millimeters is going to be good. So I'm going to go now to extrude, and I'm going to pick this object, and notice that it automatically finds the holes, and it creates those circles, and will create those as holes. And I'm just going to extrude this down 2 millimeters, and I'm going to say okay. Okay. So what we have is part of our chassis, right? And when the Arduino is placed on top of it, we're going to be able to line up right there for the screws to go through to mount the Arduino. All right. Now, let me also say that you can, at this point, you might feel like, well, that's not really a chassis. That's kind of just a rectangle. But bear in mind, you can add to it, right? So I don't have to have a chassis that's this basic, right? Just a rectangle. I could have a sketch where I can put the whole design of my chassis. And in fact, what I can do is I can always add to this, okay? I can add to this design. That's not a big deal. The point of this video is really to show you how you can build around, design around the Arduino, all right? Now, we're not done yet, because if you look at this, we have an Arduino that's floating, right? So that's not really going to work good, right? How is the Arduino going to float? Well, it's not going to float really good. And what we need to add to this is we need to add some standoffs. That is to say, we need to add some features, a cylinder that's going to go from the board, from the chassis, up to the underside of the Arduino, all right? And we need to do that for these 4 holes. So let's go and let's freeze the Arduino. So we'll hide that. And what we're going to do is we're going to sketch on top of the board here, all right? And I'm going to draw a circle on either one, on every hole, right, like this. Right. And then I want to set the size of the circles, all right? So I'm going to make this, well, what size do I need? Actually, let me back up here. Let me delete that, because before I do that, what I want to do is I want to get the size of the holes. So the size of the holes are 3.5. So if we want a millimeter in the space between the hole and the outside of the cylinder, that means we need to add 2 millimeters, right? 1 millimeter on each side, so that the circle on the outside here, the cylindrical hole, is going to be 5.5. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and make this 6. We're not going to have any problem with making this a little bit thicker. And now I'm going to set all of these equal. So they're all going to be set to 6 millimeters. And I can finish my sketch. And let's go back here. And we can turn on the Arduino and we can see what we have. Okay. And now, actually, I'm gonna select the chassis as my active component, and I'm gonna go and extrude each one of these. Let me turn the Arduino back off again, and I'm gonna extrude each one of these regions. Right? Notice I'm getting the ring between the outer circle that I just created and the hole. Right? And how high do I want to extrude them? Well, I want to extrude them a distance up to the surface of the Arduino. We know that's 4 millimeters, right? But let's do it properly here, all right? So what we're going to do is choose a distance to object, and I'm going to zoom in right there, and I'm going to pick the underside of that board, and then we're going to say OK. And you can see what that did. All right, and let me hide the Arduino. There we go. Okay, so now I have the beginnings of my chassis. I have standoffs that are located in the regions around the holes for the Arduino. So when it comes time to mount this Arduino to the board, I have everything perfectly aligned. All right, so that's how we can build the beginning of our chassis around the shape and mounting location for the holes of the Arduino. All right. In the next video, we'll move on from this. We'll add some different features. We'll add some different components, and we'll start to flesh out and build out our chassis design.